Regarding ferrets, I got my first ferret probably around 1994. So that was, wow, over 20 years ago, almost 22 years ago, and I've just never stopped. They're amazing creatures. The kinds of games that I make, they're friendly games. It's not about beating other people up. It's not about bad feelings. It's not about negotiation or diplomacy or anything like that. Nothing wrong with those kinds of games. That's just not in my wheelhouse. I left my job, my day job, in November of 2014. I was a computer programmer, but something was gnawing at me. Things just weren't working out, and I wound up leaving, and I realize now what it was is I just don't enjoy computer programming. It's not fun. Game design for me is amazing and thrilling and rewarding, and I really enjoy it. I think I found who I am, so I think my ambitions are just to just keep on exploring who I am and see what I could do and push myself to the limit. How good can I make these games? How long can I survive making these games? And I'm pretty excited about that.
I think the things that Gil's trying to accomplish, there's multiple things. I think he really wants to take players on a journey, on a story, you know, tell them a story while they're playing a game. He's an incredibly creative person, and he sees game design as an art form more than just sort of practical, logistical mechanisms, scoring. I mean, that's part of it, but he sees it as so much more than that.
Growing up, I wanted to be a video game designer. I liked playing video games as I grew up, despite not being very good at them, but once I started playing modern board games, I realized that I liked board games better than I liked video games, and from then on, I haven't looked back. The reason I like to make games is I feel uncomfortable if I am holding on to an idea for too long. I've always been kind of creative, you know, I've tried making music, and I've tried writing stories, and I'm just better at making games than anything else that I've tried in the past. You're gonna get half of this, so you're gonna get 7 million. So I'll grab.
I didn't realize you got market.
Yep. So I get 5 more viewers.
Gil's a really smart guy, really smart designer. He's the guy I want to bring my games to when I'm working on them, when I'm stuck and I want to get through a problem, because he'll be able to get right to it, and he'll be honest about what's working and what isn't. He's got ideas, he just wants to get out there. I think he enjoys exploring game mechanics and putting together systems that work well. And I think a lot of it he just wants to share his games with other people. I know he likes to get stuff out as quickly as possible and not overthink things. And he's encouraged me to do the same, because I can sometimes get stuck in my head before I get stuff out. So it's all about, you know, getting something out so you can test it, figure out what works, what doesn't. But you can't improve it unless you can get it to the table, you can get it in front of people.
Gil likes to take things apart and put them together, like take them apart, see how they work, like conceptually. Like he studied creative writing, and so he was really used to, you know, reading a story and chopping it into bits and going, what systems are here that make this work, and then putting it together. He did the same thing with music. He was like, okay, so let me see how all of this goes together, and what if I move this here, what if I move this there? So it just seemed like the systems of it, like like logically looking at it, and also the idea of fun, and like quantifying, like, what are these rules, how do they work together, and how do they affect the people that are interacting with them and each other.
He's very friendly, he's very smart, and he's just like easy to talk to. I think pretty much everyone knows him in the industry. Because he's so smart, it's kind of intimidating when you're playing games with him, so you're like scared to make the wrong move. But he is super open-minded and just generally a nice guy.
You're first player. So when one deck gets drawn out,
oh, cool.
Each side has a different effect.
Yep.
So you can have like a different layout every time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. You may want to A and B it also, so we can like easily distinguish, but that works really well. I've encountered some obstacles, as anyone would when starting out, and the obstacles have changed as the years gone by. My primary obstacle was just getting my games published, and that took quite a few years until in 2010 my game Prolix came out. The next challenge there was making sure my games got published in a way that I liked. And I realized in order for me to be happy with that, I had to self-publish. So I started self-publishing in 2014, and that brought a whole lot of obstacles with it also, obviously, as self-publishing would. I remember with the networks, when it was about to launch on Kickstarter, another game with a TV theme came out 2 weeks before, and that was not a happy day. But we both funded with way past our goals, so that came out really well, and we were both really happy with that. You know, I now had another obstacle, which was finding people to test with. I didn't know anyone to test with, and I needed people who would play my broken games and would tell me my games were broken and exactly what was broken about them.
I can end up at the end of the game with the lead and then fall into second place after doing such a wonderful job with the investor.
10 is probably too much. I might also just make it related to whether you have money in your bank or not.
I had really very little to do.
So I met Gil at the Board Game Designers Forum. It's a board game prototyping group in New York City, and so graduate students at NYU and the New School, plus just designers at large here in New York City, come together to test their prototypes. So he's been a member of the group, I think, for something like 6 years now.
He, I guess, is one of the founding members of the NYC playtest group. So I got to know him through there. He playtested my games and I playtested his, and he often has a very clear vision of what he wants his game to be. And he has a great understanding of game design as a process. And he's just able to bring that combination of skills together to like really produce a great game. And he understands when things are going wrong and ways to fix them.
He has a surgeon's way of approaching his games. The surgeon looks at a human body more as, you know, the ways that the mechanisms work, because if you think of a human, you know, being beneath there, you might not be able to make those cuts, and so he can remove those organs as needed, you know, and make those cuts. And you know, that was something that I as a designer needed to learn over and over again, that, you know, that getting too attached to any single mechanic can be to the detriment of the play experience.
A lot of people think that the ideas are the hard part, but the ideas are the easiest part. But the idea isn't worth anything until I can actually make something that I can put on the table and test. And once I start testing and I can see that this thing has legs, that's when the game becomes something useful. And even then it's a lot of work. So it's so important to not overvalue your idea and not baby your idea and protect your idea, because there are so many times when I started with an idea and then the game that emerges is completely different than that original idea.
He took out in Battle Merchants this core mechanic. He had started with this mechanic of you know, buying that also just determined turn order, and he just couldn't get it to work, you know, after years of trying it. And even I remember playing it and thinking, well, it kind of works, it's getting close, and what he eventually decided was he could simplify that part to make all the other parts blossom more, and so he cut it. And you know, that was the impetus for the game. That was the key idea that made him want to design the game in the first place. And so it's a pretty remarkable thing for him to, you know, take the thing that got him to make the game in the first place and then decide it wasn't part of the game after all.
I don't owe that original idea anything. It doesn't matter that that was the idea that started the game. It's just scaffolding, and scaffolding is meant to be taken down. I try to work on only 2 games at any given time, maybe 3 games. That's just what I can test. That's my threshold for testing, because I like to deep dive into games. I like to play test the same game 1 to 3 times every week, so I would rather spend my playtesting time iterating on the same design and trying something new and trying something new. I prefer that to jumping back and forth from one concept to the next concept to the next concept. So to me, I'd rather play test the same idea repeatedly than play test a bunch of different ideas at different times.
Well, and Gil was designing the networks. At first, he wanted the television shows within the context of the game to be based on popular 70s and 80s shows. And believe it or not, Gil isn't that much of a TV watcher, so I helped him make a list of shows that were big back in the day. At first, when he was playtesting, instead of, guy who dies in everything, it was actual celebrities.
The Networks was a great example of how flexible Gil is, where I think he started out with a more complex kind of game, something that was more heavily kind of Euro, and then eventually he was able to simplify it down to the point where it became lighter, slightly more luck-based, and a little bit more just theme-based as well, sort of heavy on theme. And so, one of the real pleasures of that game is to, see the different cards with the different goofy 80s and 90s shows that he's remade there, and it's really hilarious. And I think that game maybe taught him a lot about how important theme is and how theme can contribute to the overall play experience.
You can see some elements of Gil in each of his games. I think the Networks is definitely like it's got Gil humor. I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, there are like pop culture references, and there are these tropes that are used in, the different actors or actresses that you can purchase. And that's really what makes the game Gil.
I think his games do have a lot of his personality injected in them. I mean, they all seem to carry that sense of humor, which is often pretty dry, punny. So yeah, it does seem to be a thread that carries through. I enjoy Gil's games a lot. They're really smart. They fit together really well. The Networks is fantastic. I really enjoy Battle Merchants also, which doesn't get enough play, in my opinion. No, I love playing Gil's games. I always love seeing what he's working on, what he's bringing out that's new.
I think that, if there's one uniting factor between all of Gil's games, it's the sense that he wants to make sure that everyone can play his games. That you don't have to be a hardcore gamer to get it, and that it's not something that hardcore gamers are going to hate. He has games that have very different themes and very different play mechanics, very different sorts of games, from very strategic to like Bad Medicine, which is just fun party. Gil always wants to make sure that his games are inclusive, that his games are something that, whether you've never played a game before or you've been playing games for decades, that you're going to come to it and find something interesting, and that those people can sit at the same table, and the person who's new to games is going to not get completely trounced by someone who's been playing games for their whole life. He tries to balance it and make a welcoming table.
I think the things that contribute to Gil's success are, there's multiple factors. I think first of all, it's the tenacity. He really has the patience and the smarts, and really does his homework to know what you have to do to make yourself visible. But more importantly than that, I think he really is very wise when it comes to the qualities that make a marketable and enjoyable and successful game. He's very into the replayability factor, and he's very concerned with seeing games as an art form, and making sure that it's actually about something, and making it appeal to people by sort of telling a story and taking them on a journey while they're playing a game at the same time.
I'm very thankful that I've managed to build a following. I've managed to make games that people enjoy, and I'm really thrilled and thankful about that.
He needs to keep doing what he's doing because he's putting out great games, and I really enjoy playing his games. I recommend his games to others. I always appreciate his feedback when I'm working on my games, and I'm really glad to be part of this community, and I think he's a big part of that.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Gil for being so friendly and welcoming. If it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have gone full on into Game in a Curry, and we probably wouldn't have started doing all these different projects. I probably wouldn't have started getting into freeform LARPs and writing freeform LARPs. So thanks, Gil.
Make more games. Make the game that you don't think you want to play yet. Because I think one of the things that you are learning is just how awesome games that you didn't know you liked are when you actually make them.
A good man, Gil Hova. I'm proud of you. Totally sincere. Proud of you.